Tonight, Moscow's not-so-secret weapon. We investigate Russia's brazen sanctions busting, happening every day and in plain sight off the UK coast. Blacklisted tankers carrying sanctioned Russian oil are funding Russia's war and propping up its economy. So why aren't the UK and the EU seizing these shadow fleets?
It's not solved yet. There are a lot of vessels that continue to operate. We need to be faster, and I think we're doing well, but we need to do better.
That's the head of the European Parliament admitting to me that the continent needs to do more to blunt Moscow's war machine. In fact, some European countries are actually funding it. We'll show you the evidence in a special report coming up. Plus,
I helped her with her shoes and said, "Hind, whatever happens and should not look back, hold onto me and evacuate."
she died alone while waiting for help. The final hours of 5-year-old Hind Rajab, as remembered by her mother. And
that's its face! Stop it!
and how Donald Trump has reinvented ICE to target immigrants in American cities. That's all coming up on The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Good evening. They're the shadow ships funding Russia's war in Ukraine. Dozens of them pass through the English Channel every month, operating with apparent impunity, right under the noses of Kiev's allies, the very allies imposing sanctions against Moscow's oil trade. And the thing is, every country in Europe knows they exist and what they're carrying, up to 1 million barrels of oil, worth more than £40 million. But the UK has decided not to follow America's lead and seize the blacklisted tankers. Instead, all they're doing is this. Have a look.
This is a message from the United Kingdom's Maritime and Coast Guard Agency. Adequate insurance records for this vessel cannot be located.
So why demand only insurance documents when it's clear that this is a blacklisted ship? And more importantly, why are countries in Europe still paying for Russian oil and gas?
One of the most shameful statistics that's out there is that Europe, I mean, it's admittedly concentrated in a handful of countries, but Europe is still putting more money into Putin's war machine by purchases of petrochemicals and gas than they are giving to Ukraine. How can that be right? I find that extraordinarily frustrating.
That was the strong condemnation from the former head of MI6 speaking to me on this programme earlier this month. So my question of the night, could we soon see a military confrontation between Russia and a NATO ally at sea? When will Europe act? So I asked the head of the European Parliament. We'll hear from her in a moment. But first, here's what happened when our business correspondent Paul Kelso went hunting for Russia's shadow fleet.
On a misty February morning in Dover, we're heading into the English Channel to see if we can find a secret weapon in Russia's war against Ukraine hiding in plain sight.
Over 400 ships a day come down through the shipping lanes.
Yeah.
But when you see these Russian ships like that and these oil tankers, you know, it's a regular occurrence, to be honest. No one really takes any notice of it.
So supposedly in the shadows, but they're not really, are they?
Not really, no. I mean, they're only 6 miles from the coast.
Matt usually takes fishing trips on the Porsche. We're after a bigger catch. Sanctioned tankers carrying Russian oil just a few miles from the White Cliffs. The shadow fleet on our shores.
We're expecting to see perhaps 3 boats in the next 2 hours or so, all of them carrying oil, which the British authorities, the European authorities on this side, the French, Germans, the Netherlands, these boats will have passed within sight of states that have banned the sale and the purchase of this oil. But they're watching these ships pass through under their nose. This is brazen sanctions busting, and it's happening every day in the Channel here. Hopefully we'll get a glimpse of it. So that's us, and we're heading...
That's it. So that's us in the top corner, and we're heading into the shipping lane now.
We've been tracking 3 tankers for days to intercept them here.
There it is there, Weigel.
That's the first of
This is the first of the Russian tankers, and that's coming down the shipping lane. We'll stop here near the sandbank, and then it'll come past us.
Right on schedule, the first comes into range.
So this is the Rigel. It's part of the shadow tanker fleet. It's come from Primorsk in the Baltic, a Russian port loaded with about 1 million barrels of oil. That's worth $55 million roughly at today's prices. It's sailing under a Cameroon flag, but it's sanctioned by the UK, the EU and other countries because they believe it is essentially funding Russia's war in Ukraine. The proceeds of that cargo ultimately will flow back to Moscow.
The Rigel is one of 3 sanctioned tankers we've been tracking since they were loaded with Russian oil in the Baltic. Cameroon flagged it was filled at Primorsk in the Gulf of Finland on the 2nd of February. On the same day, the Kusai, sailing under a Sierra Leone flag, loaded in Ust-Luga near the Estonian border. And 2 days later, the Hyperion, a Russian flag tanker, was loaded in Vysotsk, before all 3 began journeys that would take them through the Dover Straits. These vessels are part of a growing fleet of blacklisted tankers that have kept Russian oil revenues flowing despite a European embargo and Western sanctions intended to squeeze the Kremlin, sometimes turning off tracking devices or faking their location to avoid detection.
They're finding it difficult to sell their oil, and the best way to get it out, if they can't send it through the pipelines, was to expand the dark tanker fleet. So they were attracting unscrupulous owners with old tankers to join the fleet. And the dark fleet has, over the years, it's been said to be anything from 400 to about 1,200 different tankers. Present estimates are that it's probably actively about 800 tankers, but that's an awful lot of shipping around the world which is moving illegally, as we're laundering the oil. It's like laundering money. So taking sanctioned oil, transferring it to something legal and making it look legal.
This chart shows that until the invasion of Ukraine, Russian oil exports by volume were largely carried by Western-owned or insured tankers, shown here in blue. But following embargoes and a European and American price cap, the volume carried by the shadow fleet, shown in red, has grown. Since 2024, many of the vessels have been sanctioned directly, but a fleet with often opaque ownership and obscure insurance sails on, enabling Russian oil to flow at almost the same volume. The Hyperion is among them. Blacklisted by the UK, the EU and the US, it's the next to pass us in the Channel. Its name on the bow in Cyrillic is a deliberate giveaway. It's sailing under a Russian flag, but only since December, when, after delivering naphtha to Venezuela, it switched flags and evaded the US naval blockade. While we watch it, someone is watching us and sounding the horn. With a 400,000 barrel capacity worth around $22 million, it's taking no chances. To understand why the shadow fleet is growing, we need to leave the sea for the City of London. A global centre for commodity trading where analysts have been tracking the impact on the Russian oil market and economy as it's been forced to find new customers for a commodity that generates up to 50% of state revenues.
Over 60% of Russian crude is being exported on the shadow fleet. So you have more vessels that need to be in the chain. So let's say a sanctioned vessel loads Russian crude, and let's say it's on its way to China. It could make up to 5, 6, 7 STS or ship-to-ship transfers along the way in order to disguise the origin of the crude and move it on to non-sanctioned vessels, which it will eventually discharge into its end buyer.
China and India now buy 85% of Russian oil, but only at a discount that is hurting the Russian economy. To keep oil moving, Russia has had to cut prices, with the gap between the price of a barrel of North Sea oil and Urals crude growing from $3 in 2021 to almost $30 this year.
We saw last year a 26% fall year on year in oil and gas revenues for Russia, 50% down in January alone year on year. So I would expect a fairly sizable hit. There's three things that affect Russia's hydrocarbon revenues. It's the international price of oil, it's the discount that they have to offer, it's also the relative strength of the ruble versus the dollar. And all of those things have been moving against Russia in terms of revenue.
Russia's shadow fleet now faces military action too.
French Navy.
In January, French special forces seized a tanker sailing from Russia in the Mediterranean and detained its captain. And US forces have seized at least 7 tankers since its crackdown on Venezuela, including Russian-flagged vessels. The UK does monitor the shadow fleet and Russian Navy vessels known to accompany tankers. Last month, 2 Royal Navy patrol vessels in the foreground here shepherded a corvette from Russia's Baltic fleet through the Channel. But despite the almost daily passage of sanctioned ships, including this, the Kusai, our 3rd tanker, British intervention largely sounds like this.
This is a message from the United Kingdom's Maritime and Coast Guard Agency.
We overhear a message to its captain from the Coast Guard. They doubt the ship has valid insurance and want proof.
Adequate insurance records for this vessel cannot be located. Please email with a copy of your civil liability certificate and or blue card within 24 hours of this request.
The concern over insurance is real. Many shadow vessels are old and poorly maintained, and an accident here in the world's busiest shipping lane could be catastrophic. But these regular sailings are a challenge to Britain's willingness to act.
I think there must come a point at which Britain and its allies, we won't do this alone, we'll do it particularly with the Dutch and the Danes and the Norwegians and the seagoing nations of Northern Europe. They together, I think, will get much tougher with these Russian ships, even if they're escorted. And when that happens, I think we're heading probably sometime this year for some sort of militarized confrontation at sea, possibly in the Channel or in the North Sea, somewhere certainly near to British coasts.
A day after our close encounters, 2 more sanctioned tankers, the White Condor 1 and the Russian-flagged Ariadne, cruise through the Channel, carrying another 400,000 barrels of Russian oil each. Every vessel has the right to innocent passage, and we don't know the final customer for their oil. And many countries do not recognise Western sanctions against Russia. The British government says deterring, disrupting and degrading the Russian shadow fleet is a priority, and that it has requested proof of insurance from more than 600 tankers. But for now, the oil that greases Russia's war machine continues to flow, not in the shadows, but under our nose. Paul Kelso, Sky News in the English Channel.
We saw in Paul's report just how well Russia is using its shadow fleet to bypass global sanctions. More than 60% of Russian crude oil is exported on blacklisted vessels. So the question is, what will the UK and the EU do to stop it? More sanctions, yes, but would they actually move to seize Moscow's ships? I put that question to the President of the European Parliament, Roberta Metsola, earlier this evening and asked her to reflect on 4 years of war in Europe.
Well, it's been a long 4 years of Ukrainians fighting for their freedom, for their security, and essentially fighting for the European continent. 4 years since Russian tanks rolled into Ukraine, and today constant bombing in Kiev, women and children, in a situation which should never have happened. The European Union has responded with unprecedented support, whether it is in military or financial or economic help for Ukrainians, welcoming Ukrainian refugees across the continent. This has been the toughest year. It has been an extremely cold winter, and we hope that finally peace can come to this continent. But that peace should be with Ukraine at the table, and no decision should be taken about Ukraine without Ukraine.
And yet Europe continues to inadvertently or overtly fund Russia's war by continuing to purchase oil and gas.
Well, we've passed legislation, not only through sanctions, by placing sanctions on making sure that first gas cannot be bought, not only inside the European Union, but also not imported via other countries in cheaper or different forms. And we're finally edging closer, took a while, to banning oil to the same extent. From the very first day, there was an understanding, first of all, that there were countries that were over-reliant on Russia for cheap energy. We had to completely uncouple from that. We worked together across the world with our partners, including the United States. We're currently going with separate measures and similar ones, both in Congress and in the European Union, in order to defund Russia's war machine. We still have to do more on the shadow fleet, with more vessels that need to be impounded.
We have done a report today with shadow fleets that are operating as normal. When you say we have to do more, what is that? Because
adopting the 20th package of sanctions. So we have adopted 19 packages of sanctions. We're slowly coming towards the adoption of the 20th. We're pushing very hard for that to happen. For us, any possibility for Russia to continue to wage its war against Ukraine and against Europe as a whole by using funds that could inadvertently or overtly, as you said, come from the European Union is unacceptable. And that is something we've said from day one, and we continue to work with speed. I would like it to be faster towards that aim.
Are you pushing European countries? Because, I mean, we're talking about France, Belgium. I mean, these countries are continuing to do what you are telling them they mustn't do to fund Russia's war.
Well, I would not agree with that statement. I think the leaders of the countries have come together and they've been part of a coalition of the willing countries who have said we have to do everything to help Ukraine. Could we have been faster at the beginning? Absolutely. Could we have had easier legislative solutions to what we thought was, you know, never going to happen on our continent? Absolutely. But these are countries that came together in unanimity, all 27, to say that they would adopt sanctions and legislation together to make sure that we do not accept what Russia is doing and that we help Ukraine to the maximum that we can.
So when you say seizing stopping these shadow fleets, will there be a plan to seize them?
Well, there are some that have been. We've seen what happened in the Nordic seas. We see what happens around the Baltic countries. There is a lot of activity in the Mediterranean. We're working with the United States because this is a global effort. But at the end of the day, we need to cooperate more in order to make sure that ships that are illegally carrying Russian ware in order to fund the Russian war against Ukraine should not continue to sail in our waters.
Just to ask further on that, when you say that we're seeing some action, is it a coordinated action that is now going to be taken, a plan? Because we continue to do these reports on Sky News where we're seeing these shadow fleets operate quite freely.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of cooperation. We're in the UK, and this has been also one of the discussions that we have as the UK and the European Union reset their relationship, that we should do more in terms of interoperability and intelligence sharing. And we have seen a lot of work jointly on this shadow fleet. It's not solved yet. There are a lot of vessels that continue to operate. We see also quick changes of flags that these ships are registered from one, I would say, jurisdiction to another in an illegal manner. But we need to be faster, and I think we're doing well, but we need to do better.
President Metsola, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
That was President of the European Parliament speaking to me earlier. You're watching The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Still to come, the chef and founder of the charity World Central Kitchen, and what it took to provide 1 million meals in Gaza. What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist. A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan has the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra Al-Baghir has this report.
And this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist? I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up. Being a Sky News journalist. Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is. First off, just the scale of what we're looking at. Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
We started the programme focusing on Russia's shadow fleet and how money from sanctioned oil is being used to fund Moscow's war effort. Now I want to turn to the humanitarian need in Ukraine. I've been speaking to renowned chef and humanitarian Jose Andres, who spent 250 days inside the country with his team from World Central Kitchen after war broke out. We chatted about what more Europe can do and what happens when food is used as a weapon of war. He also told me about the milestone his charity has just reached, providing 1 million hot meals a day in Gaza. Just have a listen to him describing how he mobilised when war came to Europe.
Obviously, at the beginning, we didn't know what was going to be happening. We began at the border in Poland. We were in almost in every single border town, feeding people. We were inside Poland all the way to Warsaw as more refugees were living. We were in Spain. We were in Germany. Very quickly, we saw within days that we had to be inside Ukraine too, because it was long lines of people trying to exit. And I arrived to Kyiv when still the Russian troops were in the not too many kilometers away from the heart of Kyiv. To get there was, checkpoint after checkpoint after checkpoint after checkpoint. The entire Ukraine was activated. But on that day that they were able to be pushing the Russian troops out of Bucha, out of Irpin, and was very clear they were not going to make it into Kyiv, thanks to the bribery of these soldiers. That was a moment of celebration. One of the biggest armies in the world, almost at the heart of Kyiv, was this iconic moment of President Zelensky saying, I don't need a flight, but I need these weapons to defend my people.
Do you think that President Trump then has a point when he says Europeans need to step up, take more responsibility because, they put these sanctions in place, but then they allow these sanctions to be evaded and they're still feeding the Russian war machinery by buying and purchasing some of the oil and gas?
Well, but this is not only Europe. The United States has their part too. Obviously, we've seen that 2025, the military aid of the United States has totally dropped. So the United States has a very big responsibility. Why Russia has a shadow fleet around the world where they keep commercializing without the international community putting a total stop to that. It's more than Europe, it's even more than America. I think the countries of the world, the war keeps going. If I keep getting my oil and I keep moving things forward, it's okay. It's not happening in my country. That's the problem. When you think the problem belongs to somebody else. In a way, when everybody says I'm supporting Ukraine, yes, but not enough. If you're supporting, support all the way to the end. Don't support just 50%. Don't let things halfway finish. Are we with Ukraine or are we not with Ukraine? This war can end in the 2026 if we use every resource at our disposal to put the true pressure on Russia that will make Putin used to have to cancel the war once and for all and give the land to Ukraine that they illegally have taken.
food is used as a way to control populations. Aid is often prevented in these places from reaching the most needy, despite the desperate calls from aid organizations like yourself and others, major organizations like the UN. Those calls often get ignored in these conflicts.
This war is happening at the door of Europe. I will say that Ukraine must be Europe by now. And obviously, food, Ukraine, everybody forgets that it feeds 500 million people in the world with all the grain they produce. It's one of the most fertile countries in the world. And their farmers are unbelievable. President Zelensky, in a way, was the one trying to say we need to open those grain raw corridors, or many countries in Africa are going to be going hungry.
1 million meals now served, hot meals in Gaza. Just tell me, as you reflect back on the last 2.5 years, what this moment means for you.
Well, we reached 1 million meals at Gaza, and in a way, the Palestinian teams in Gaza are celebrating a pride, but it's a very bittersweet celebration. Because when Humanitarian Kitchen, we said we need to reach 1 million meals a day ourselves, plus the help of everybody else, means that the need is still huge. 1 million meals is not enough. It's only 1 meal a day for 50% of the population. The infrastructures, they've been destroyed. Hospitals, they've been destroyed. Schools, they've been destroyed. Many of the restaurants that used to provide the food before the war, they've been destroyed. So we are still very much in emergency humanitarian mode. So while we do everything we can to open more kitchens, we are operating around 6 kitchens, the World Central Kitchen, that do close to 600,000 meals a day, plus another 76 partner kitchens that cover the rest. This way, we have plenty of kitchens and food production areas in the different parts of Gaza. This way, through more than 1,300 distribution points and almost 200 routes, we are able every day to be reaching people. But more needs to be done. More trucks must be let in. The people still have no jobs. They have no money. Therefore, humanitarian aid is still needed as today.
I think back to 2024 when you lost a number of your aid workers, your staff. I guess when you say bittersweet, it also is a moment of reflection for your Palestinian staff on the ground, for your teams outside the country, thinking about what happened to your team who were killed on that fateful day.
7 members of World Central Kitchen perished on that day. We keep asking the questions to understand exactly what happened, who really was responsible. Is the least we can do for them, for the families, but also remember for all the humanitarian workers that they've lost their lives in Gaza. Has been one of the most brutal situations in any conflict zone, where hundreds of humanitarians from different organizations have lost their lives. So obviously security for us is very important, and we make sure everybody is trained in the right way, and you try to coordinate the best you can with everybody. But unfortunately, the people that are suffering every single day are the Palestinians that live there, not only the thousands that work with our organization, but the many more that use every day you wake up not knowing what is going to happen.
Did you think when you started in this line of work and business that you would end up being in a place where you were feeding so many hungry people in some of the most dangerous places on the planet?
Humanitarian Kitchen was in Israel the first day because we had to be there, because the people needed our help, because the kibbutz were decimated by that terrorist attack. At the same time, we were in Gaza because the people of Gaza needed our help. At the same time, we were in Ukraine because the people of Ukraine needed our help. In every one of those moments, We have locals taking care of locals. Ukrainians feeding Ukrainians, Palestinians feeding Palestinians. And I'm very proud that the great organization that I can personally be there sometimes, that our team of World Central Kitchen is there supporting them. And is that what you see? That in the really darkest, worst moments of humanity, the best of humanity shows up.
That's Jose Andres, a renowned chef and humanitarian. This is The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Next up on the programme, we hear from the mother of Hind Rajab, the 5-year-old girl whose final moments trapped in a car in Gaza have been turned into a film that's up for an Oscar. We've got some breaking news to bring you now. And Cuba says its border guards have shot and killed 4 people who were on a speedboat registered in Florida. The border guards reportedly approached the boat after it entered territorial waters and someone on board opened fire. The nationalities of those on board are still unknown. The incident comes after tensions between Cuba and the United States continues to rise. As soon as we get more information on that incident, we will be bringing that to you. This is The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Next up, how Donald Trump weaponized ICE. Our Sky News Explains reporter joins me in the studio. He spoke for 1 hour and 48 minutes. Donald Trump hailed a new golden age for America in the longest ever State of the Union address. The US president warned Iran to make a deal. He talked up the economy, and he also defended his administration's crackdown on immigration. Our Sky News Explains team have been examining how the president has weaponized his immigration enforcement agency. Just have a look.
ICE is more powerful than it's ever been.
They are great patriots, the Border Patrol and ICE.
We've seen a load of videos coming out of the US of immigration agents masked up, using tear gas, smashing car windows, and of course the deadly shootings of US citizens.
This administration has kind of sent a message, immigrants are the enemy and that maximum aggression is to be rewarded.
This is effectively the officers of ICE immigration agents in this city.
This is what they'll do to me. They'll shoot a woman in the face.
But what is ICE? How has it changed? And why did Trump give it so much power?
Without question, it has deeply affected America.
I'm Oliver Nikido-Lynham, and this is Sky News Explains.
And Olive joins me here in the studio. Welcome, Olive, and congratulations on your new role. So you've been looking at this particular issue with ICE, and one of the things you talked about is the level of power that ICE has. Just talk us through that, because we are seeing an increase in funding by President Trump.
Yeah, in the last year, there's been a massive increase and a promise for that in the next few years as well. So last year, Congress passed a bill that promised an extra $75 billion over the next 4 years. So we've got a graph, and in that first graph, that ICE used to get about $10 billion a year. And as you can see on the screen, over the next 4 years, they'll be promised that extra $75 billion. And I mean, that's a massive increase from what they used to get, pushing it to almost around $30 billion. And if we put that into a bit more context, we've got another graph that kind of shows ICE and military spending from countries across the world. And what you can see with that one is that with this new projected ICE funding, you can just see all of those countries, Canada, Turkey, Spain. ICE now has more money to spend than all of those. So it's a huge increase, and I think it talks to the future investment that the Trump administration wants and is willing to give to ICE. I think another interesting aspect as well, alongside the money with the bill, was detention facilities. So at the moment, there's around 216 detention facilities across the country. But in this big, beautiful bill that Congress passed last year, Trump has pledged to expand all of those, not just expand the ones he's already got, but actually build a lot more. So I think that really talks to the future of what he sees with ICE.
Yeah, that's extraordinary, the level of sort of power and funding they're getting. And we're also seeing a change in sort of tactic as well.
Yeah, and so with the number of ICE agents to start with, and then how they're deployed as well. So beforehand, there kind of used to be about 10,000 agents and officers. But in January this year, the White House announced that it's now standing at 22,000. And when I spoke to a former acting ICE director, John Sandweg, he was really concerned about the kind of hiring process and the vetting behind that. And he was saying, in normal times, it would take over 4 years to vet and train that number of people. You've got to think about talking to their families, looking at their past records. It's a really comprehensive process. And now we're seeing how that's played out on the streets as well. There's been a lot of concern, I guess, about the level of aggression and force that these agents are using. And in our report, we looked at one particular video which shows how ICE officers are kneeling on someone. And these sorts of tactics, some of them are prohibited, some are only to be used in specific circumstances. But I guess it raises a lot of questions about accountability and also fear amongst the communities that are encountering ICE in public as well.
So we've seen that level of aggression, but we're also seeing a change in tone, a softer tone being taken.
Yes, so in the past few weeks, Donald Trump has announced that hundreds of immigration agents, including ICE, but also other agencies, are being removed from places like Minneapolis, where, of course, we saw the shootings of Renee Good and Alex Pretty. But I think that only speaks to one aspect of the immigration policy. It's the visibility of agents. But I think there are lots of wider conversations about what ICE does next. And even the cultural impact when we look at things like the Grammys. We've got celebrities like Hailey Bieber wearing ICE out pins. And it's really sparked a wider community conversation about the role in which ICE should play in society.
Fascinating. Where can our viewers find your Explains?
If you search Sky News Explains on YouTube.
Olive, thank you so much for joining us here on the programme. Well, that's it from me and the team tonight. We'll be, of course, tracking that breaking story that we discussed a short while ago. So do stay with us. Anna Botting will be up next for The Wrap. I'll be back on Monday. Goodbye for now.